Awesome. All right, hi everyone. Welcome and thank you for joining us today. In this panel discussion, we're going to talk about adapting to changes in the tourism sector during and after COVID-19. And we'll be talking specifically today about how tourism operators can use this time to leverage technology and social media to build virtual experiences that will help themselves with the reopening of the tourism industry in the near future. So my name is Megan Monis, and I also have Rachel Davis here with me from CESO, and we'll be moderating the panel discussion. Rachel will be doing some background work, making sure everything flows smoothly with the technology. We also have Sebastien Desnoyers here from Indigenous Tourism Association of Canada, ITAC. He's the Chief Marketing Officer. We have Shae Bird, the Executive Director of Indigenous Tourism Alberta. And we have Robin Tapley, the owner of Canadian Adventure Expeditions and also a longtime advisor of CESO. And they'll be leading the discussion today. So before we get started, at the end, we'll just let you know that we'll have a time for a question and answer period. So as we're talking, if you think of any questions, feel free to type them into the chat, and we'll also address those at the end. Okay, so over the past couple months, we've been hearing a lot of talk about how tourism operators can use this time to build virtual experiences that will help better prepare for the reopening of the tourism sector. With that being said, I haven't heard much about what this looks like and have seen a lot of questions about how is this actually done. So I just want to put that out there to the panelists, I guess we can call you. Maybe you can talk a little bit about what does it actually mean to build a virtual experience? So what forms can this take? What does it look like? And how can people do it?
Okay, do you want me to go first? Is that?
Go for it.
Okay, one of the things that I think that is very interesting at this time is we often say in the industry we never have time to do anything, and this has definitely been an opportunity for us to be able to do that. And one of the things that we have found in our businesses is having the time to be able to really focus now on that whole virtual kind of experience. And what we've tried to do basically, and what we're doing now as a professor, I'm also a professor at Fanshawe College, and we are now taking a substantial amount of our programs, and we are putting those onto the virtual experience. And the key thing there is, again, is trying to make those experiences as engaging as they are when you're in the field. So you want to try to create that level of excitement, all with the understanding that eventually people are going to come back and want to visit your site and meet the people that are doing it, and working on trying to keep your relative messages on the topics that you're doing, keeping those the point of focus. So a little bit of research on how do I want to do it, and then start to develop it as you're recording it or putting it together. So that's what we found. It's been a great opportunity for us to be able to go out. And the beauty about it too, Megan, which is really good, is your first draft doesn't have to be the real one. You can keep going back and try it. You can massage it until you're actually ready to put it online and feel comfortable with it.
Yeah, I think that's a really good reminder.
Absolutely. So I'll jump on that to expand off Robin does. We've seen a lot from our side, especially with our Indigenous operators across Alberta, and seeing at some of the interesting ways that they're providing some type of virtual experience. And I think there's a couple of reasons of why we can create a virtual experience. There's one, we can provide obviously another revenue generation stream while we can't actually have those in-person visitors coming. Obviously, it's probably not going to be as high as a revenue generator than your typical experience, but at least it's something. And then on top, there's just the marketing aspect of building that awareness of the product and keeping top of mind while people are stuck at home or stuck within their province and dreaming about where their next experience is going to be. And then also just building that awareness. And what we've seen with our operators is, there's been some really creative and interesting ideas depending on what their existing experience was. So You know, some of our cultural centers, it could be a walking virtual tour of the cultural center itself, and then talking about the exhibits and the history behind the exhibits. From a cultural, or for a culinary side of things, that could be virtual cooking lessons, and, you know, even going as far as say, you know, maybe you do a registration for the event itself a week prior, and then you send them certain ingredients to cook with. So they're actually cooking with the same, say, traditional ingredients that you're cooking from your area. And then also that gives them another kind of enhancing the senses with the touch and the feel. And they're not there specifically, but at least they're on the same thing versus them just shopping for the ingredients themselves. We've also seen, you know, arts and crafts. You know, there's people that have been stuck at home, especially with kids. You know, some really cool things we've seen is arts and craft ideas, but directed at children. So how do we keep those children engaged throughout the day when they're stuck at home? And doing some traditional crafts is a great way to do that. So that's been cool to see. And then from the outdoor side of things, you know, it's pretty hard to be walking through the mountains, but we've seen some, you know, virtual medicine walks where they'll walk through and show you the different leaves and the plants, and, you know, explain and share that knowledge of what these plants and what these things were used for in the past medicinally and for other reasons traditionally. And I think the nice thing about Indigenous tourism is the clientele, a vast majority, if not all, are coming to learn something. You know, they're the educational learner. They want to understand and learn about the cultural differences or the history, and really immerse themselves in that learning experience. And although they may not be able to be there in person, you can still share that knowledge from a virtual side of things, as long as you get creative with it and make sure that it's engaging throughout the process.
Mm-hmm. Key. Yeah.
And I think as well, I'll do some mileage as well on what Shae just mentioned, but there's definitely a distinction to be made around like a virtual experience, because from the old background of what we had, you know, like a virtual experience was more like a virtual reality kind of video. You put the big goggles or you put the mask ahead of you, like it's a 360 view, and then you could say like, I'm experiencing a virtual experience, like it's all in the virtual world. But I mean, obviously now, like the actual virtual experience have completely changed, and obviously it was a matter of taking a step back and looking at the situation, which obviously with COVID was a big issue for some of the businesses in time of a pandemic, but turning this into an opportunity. So I see that this was a way to generate obviously business opportunities to stay afloat, but just like in crazy situation like we're in, like just to take an opportunity and make some money, and not only make money, but also to be able to teach some of the values that, you know, are inherent to Indigenous tourism or Indigenous culture, but also sharing the knowledge. And I think that that was super important. And through the whole process as well, I always felt like providing the teaching would open doors to larger opportunities to eventually, obviously what we want is, we still like a virtual experience is great, but what we want is to at some point have the same client coming through your doors, because the revenue stream is much higher, and not only for yourself, but also for the surroundings of you, for the community, for all the elements. So it's super important, I feel like, that we have this if we want to make, you know, a sustainable model through it. So for me, that was really important. And yeah.
I think just to touch on that as well, Seb, that kind of shows the opportunity from a marketing perspective of, you know, building that awareness and attracting potential visitors for the future that may not necessarily have been there prior, but because you have these really interesting experiences virtually, anyone from around the world can really see these experiences through the internet, right? So you might be actually creating more visitation for the future because you're building that brand and that destination image of, oh, these are the Indigenous experiences that we have in this region. And that could work into, maybe it's more interprovincial travel, or maybe it's, you know, higher international markets for certain regions, right? So I think the marketing plays a huge piece into this while everyone's at home and really dreaming about where can they go next.
Yeah. Oh, it has to remain inspirational, right? And obviously that was the idea as well. Like some people might never be able to afford going to Banff or Jasper and the experience because it might be too costly for them. So having a virtual experience gives them the feeling that they've been there without realistically having to spend like the $5,000 to actually live that experience. And I'm taking this as an example just because you're from this region, Shae, but I think we can see that in the northern region as well, where sometimes people can't afford that. I mean, I want to encourage people to go and travel and visit those communities, because it's one of the key highlights for me. It's always been visiting the north. I think it's something that it's not undermined, but it's something that sometimes we don't consider enough. And there's so much beauty up there.
Yeah.
But you're right, like just sharing that, and it's just so important to be able to just, give that glimpse at something and inspire people to come and visit at some point.
I think as well, what we're doing in those situations is the virtual media creates celebrities in your communities, and it makes people want to come and meet those people eventually. Like they saw them on the internet, they were able to communicate, they were able to go on a virtual tour with them, and it creates that excitement for wanting to come there now and meet that person, because I've saw them, I've talked to them, I've engaged them. It goes so much further than just the standard traditional way of the brochure and come and visit us. We're making a human connection through the internet. Believe it or not, it's actually what it is. And even us sitting here right now, it's like I want to meet you guys like in person. It's kind of cool. But I think that's the thing that's that we get out of it, is then they come and they want to meet the guy that did the tour, or the girl that did the did the hike, or the program. And that's, I think, is for us, that creates that excitement down the road. Exactly what you guys are saying.
I think that's a really good point, Robin.
And especially to have some great feel-good content, which is much needed in time of a crisis, right? And like positive news, learning opportunities. I think that's no wonder why the government also instores some training capabilities and budget, because they wanted us to take some of the time to be able to train and learn and cover new things. So yeah, exactly.
Yeah, and just also building on what you said, Sebastien, about the learning aspect of it. Something that I've noticed is that through this time, so many people have been more still. And I think that their mind is a lot more open to absorbing information and learning opportunities. And at least what I'm seeing around me in my, immediate circle is that people want to learn right now. Like they're seeking out information on all kinds of topics, especially like cultural. People want these opportunities to dig into something. And they're really looking for a way that they can engage with another person on that more personal level, like you mentioned, Robin. It's a little bit different than when you're just reading, researching online versus actually having someone speak to you and engaging in some kind of workshop. If, like Shae mentioned, with if it's a cooking class and you send the ingredients. I actually have a few friends who are artists who have been doing workshops with crafts and paint, flowers, jewelry, and every time they're sold out. So these are just really good points. So also, given the internet and technology piece of it, for a lot of people, especially in Canada, maybe in the northern communities, the internet is not always as strong or available. So I'm wondering if maybe you can touch on that a little bit, especially when we're talking about live streaming. The capabilities are not always available for people. So what are maybe some other ways that people can engage, or they don't need as high of a bandwidth or as strong of a connection? What are some ways around this that you've heard or seen?
Yeah, from what we've seen in Alberta, and I think also when people talk about creating virtual experiences, I think people tend to get caught up and think it can be a big production, when it can be fairly simple to actually do this yourself. Having some type of stabilizer or a tripod and your phone can be more than enough to actually at least start that virtual experience process. And then if you're in an area that you don't have that strong internet connection, what we've seen is a lot of operators are actually just pre-recording and then posting in the future. And then maybe there's some type of communication platform where if people want to watch and they have questions about it, they could reach out through email or a text box or whatever that may be for kind of, maybe it's a little bit of time over it, but they can ask questions and get answers in kind of real time. But yeah, I think just, even planning for certain events, I know that there's operators right now that don't have the strong internet speed, but for National Indigenous Peoples Day, they're recording already for what they will be planning to post on that day, right? So I think that's kind of a way to get around that. It's more difficult to have that real-time engagement, but it's not like a full stop. There's certain ways you can get around that for sure to continue at least building that awareness. And, maybe it's that, partial revenue generation and all those aspects as well.
Yeah, definitely.
I think too, Shae, I think one of the key things there, what you said is pre-recorded in those situations, and the reality is too is that some communities won't have that bandwidth, but if you can pre-record it and then build up to it like it's going to be launched on a specific day, you can actually create an audience to arrive at your site at a specific time to see a pre-recorded message that's put together, and they can be engaged in it that way. I just with CESO, I've done some projects down in South America, and we're working on one right now, and we're working with an Indigenous community in Guyana. And they have their internet access is for state of the word, horrible in the interior. So that's what we're doing, and we're doing it on a little bit different platform, but we are doing a lot of pre-recorded stuff that's on the education side and providing it, and they wait for the information, then they watch it and then respond back to us, and that's one of the ways that we've been able to bridge that problem. But creating awareness, this is coming, people are waiting for it at 6 o'clock on Saturday or whatever, and then there's the message, and it's put through on a area that has a bigger bandwidth.
Yeah, for me, I mean, obviously I see three ways of doing those virtual events. There's obviously 100% if you are virtual, kind of on a live feed. There's obviously the pre-recorded, but there's also a lot of now virtual events that are also done in person. That includes some of the audience on the side. So I'm taking, for example, yoga in the park. So, I mean, obviously keeping the social distancing still up to date. I think we see that more and more. And I think that's something that you just give like a meeting point, and then you can have those virtual kind of events. So I think it's great. I mean, obviously internet for me is internet connection is key if you are to do 100% live. I mean, and I would say like that needs to come with some best practices, and testing your connection is one of them. Most people don't realize, but there's hours and there's peak hours whenever we are doing some events. Like today, like this call at 1:00 p.m. is normally high peak. So you can, especially in larger areas, you might be running out of bandwidth because other people are, especially in the time of COVID, where everyone is using virtual events or using Zoom platforms and other things like that. I mean, you're running out of bandwidth. So I would say start your meetings perhaps at 1:10 instead of 1:00, or do 1:30. So don't use those peak hours. Don't be on the hour or half hour just because like there's more clients normally. So that will help a lot. I mean, obviously, you have kids as well. Have them understand that they can't be bugging mommy and daddy at this time for the next hour. And I have 2 kids, and normally they're fairly good. Like 7 and 9. So I mean, they're not bad, but still they would come in and then just ask some questions. So sometimes it doesn't really look that good. If you have older kids, I mean, just cut their internet connection for just a bit of time. And most people don't think, but like if they are using, I don't know, TikTok, or if they're on social media or watching YouTube or anything like that, that's taking some of your bandwidth. So I mean, you might be running out of data or bandwidth at some times. I would say as well, make sure your lighting is good, sound impeccable. shut down any apps that you might have open on your computer, so the computer is not slowed down, bandwidth is on top. And then think about as well, like most of the time now, I know Shae's in Mountain Time, I'm Eastern Time, and then just be conscious as well of the time zones that people are going to be coming in, and make sure you put that forward whenever you are organizing an event. Like say it's Mountain Time, or say it's Eastern Time or Pacific Time, because that can create some confusion and frustration.
Mm-hmm.
Those were some really helpful tips, Sebastian. I mean, there are things that I wouldn't have thought of all of them. So, maybe I'll make them into a little list to send out with this video, like a little checklist of things to remember as you're planning.
Yeah, we've certainly been pivoting a lot of our normal routine into, online kind of training and webinars. So we're learning on top of things, because like we're not pro Zoom users before, or live stream users as well, but it's just now learning the process. So we just gotta adapt, right? So
yeah, that's a good thing to remember too, is that for most people, like we're all learning these technologies as well. And I think it was mentioned earlier that you can go back, you can build on it. A lot of the time when we see a product, it looks like so perfect, and you kind of almost think or assume that when you watch that they did it all in one shot. The reality is that these things, they probably had many takes to get it right, and just practicing, preparing, editing. So patience.
And I think also with the live stream side of things, it's important to remember not to get discouraged if your first one, you have internet connection or you freeze or something like that, because I've been on various first live streams for our operators and stuff, and it's almost guaranteed. Like it's just a part of the trial and error. And the thing is, we are all living in the same circumstance in relation to COVID and trying to adapt to internet and online platforms. So every person that has been in this adapting process has gone through those challenges as well. It's not going to look terrible on you. People understand. So I think it's just important to remember that, and not to let that aspect discourage you from trying again, or doing it again in the future.
Yeah, absolutely. I was actually on a webinar yesterday, and the host of the webinar, her internet cut. So it was just the person she was interviewing left. And so it was funny, because she was like, oh, I think we lost her, so I'll just take the slides and I'll just continue. And in my mind, listening to that, I was just like, that's great. Like, good for her. Continuing on technology, it happens. They finished it. So, no one's has any negative views on that. So I guess shifting a little bit, things are starting to open back up in Canada. We know that things will be opening up domestically first, and then internationally later. So with that international travel restricted, it's projected that there will be a huge market for domestic tourists this summer and in the next year. I'm wondering if we can speak a little bit on that, how our tourism operators can prepare for it, and also how and why Indigenous communities are uniquely positioned in this shift to capitalize on it, and maybe use their social media or these experiences to prepare for it. This is something that I've been hearing about a lot.
Absolutely. From a provincial perspective in Alberta, we're obviously seeing some restrictions open up, but there's still a lot of restrictions in place. So, from a marketing strategy and marketing perspective, we're really focusing on that hyper local, and how we're defining that as within 2 hours of the consumer's residence. So that's kind of where the first stage of that marketing process could go, and operators can capitalize on, okay, what is a 2-hour experience that, say you're within the region of a city like Edmonton or Calgary, maybe how do you adapt your experience? Instead of a 5-hour experience, how do you make a 2-hour experience so it's an easy day trip, and those type of things. And then, as restrictions start to loosen up, looking at that interprovincial travel, whether that's, building partnerships or marketing campaigns in partner with different associations, different operators, even finding really unique ways to build partnerships, to build that consumer attractiveness and confidence. Like, for example, we have a hotel down in Calgary, Great Eagle on Tsuut'ina Nation, that is partnering with the golf course there. And if you pay for a room at the hotel, you get a free round of golf. So the price point is a little bit higher for the room, but again, it's cheaper than getting the room plus a round of golf. So find these strategic ways to really bring in that domestic travel or that provincial travel, I think, is important. And then from the competitive positioning perspective, I think it's really important to remember that people are going to be hesitant with the mass travel product right now. People don't want to be in crowds. They don't want to be on these massive bus tours because health and safety precautions. But I think the luxury that we have with a lot of our Indigenous operators across the province, at least for Alberta, is these are typically smaller group, more intimate experiences, and they can be adapted in a way that health and safety is not put to the side. It can be emphasized and still done in an authentic way. And knowing that, a lot of our Indigenous experiences are small groups, say maybe they're under 10 people or under 12 people, and they're a walk in the mountains or something, that's also building a lot more. That's very attractive for the consumer right now in comparison to you had the consumers that already would have been attracted to that previously, but now you have additional consumers that maybe previously would have said, oh, I want to go to Jasper at say Lake Louise at 12 p.m. for lunch, when it's just like there's hundreds and hundreds of people there. They're going to think about, well, maybe I go there at, a different, not peak time, but what are some other cool experiences I can do which have lower volume? And that's where I think Indigenous tourism can really capitalize. But that being said, there needs to be that health and safety process in place. And then also that needs to be communicated through your marketing channels so you have that consumer confidence. Because I think that is going to be a key piece as well, as building that consumer confidence that it is safe to do these experiences. And these are the processes in place to ensure the public health and safety throughout this experience. And with that, you'll be able to build on that first hyper-local and then provincial and then interprovincial markets.
Yeah, I'd like to do some mileage on that. I mean, obviously, as we know, domestic travel will be the only option available for this season. And I mean, I'm not sure if you guys are looking at the calendar, but it's pretty much in 2 weeks' time. It's getting scary. Obviously, school will be ending shortly. For those that are actually in school, and I'm not sure that all provinces actually have people back in school, but so definitely how to engage with locals and hyper locals will certainly be the key to success to survive through summer 2020. And then we have to wonder as well, at some point, will there even be a season? I mean, will clients have money to travel? Will there be vacations? I know in my province here in Quebec, where for students that are in trouble to learning troubles, teachers will have to go back in the summer to teach. And normally they're like big travelers. So, I mean, do we even have people who will be able to travel? Construction was at halt for quite some time. I mean, will they have vacations or not? So we don't know. And as we know, that it's very expensive to travel in Canada, but I think there's ways to discover our country differently. But that's for me, and I think, Shae, you touch on that, but that's why it's vital for me to, partner up for greater goods. And I always felt like we're stronger working together. And while, and while building your audience, it's either on social media or on website, word of mouth or anything, we just need to amplify the network surrounding you or surrounding us. So local agency, provincial partners, Indigenous collaborators, even other experiences, national partners, all those. I mean, we're all working towards the same goals all the time, but just at different levels. But I mean, obviously the aim goal is always to get businesses through the doors of the operators. So anything that we do has to remain with the consumer at heart of our strategy, making sure that he feels comfortable, he feels safe to travel and experience Indigenous experiences. So that's for me super important. But we do have unique sets of assets for sure, and to succeed, and no wonder why. If we look at the number of already visitation within our businesses, 55% of the audience is already Canadians. So how do we target now hyper locals and locals is another way, but I think it's a good way for us to engage in a bilateral dialogue with our businesses for sure. And not only businesses, but like from a non-Indigenous perspective to an Indigenous, have the visitors to discover the heritage of the country. Very important, and I know it's more like a wish for me, but I mean, just to bridge some of the gaps of the misunderstanding of Canadians towards Indigenous communities, I think that's something that we need to work on, and then make sure that we can explain that. We have experiences that are non-crowded, sometimes remote, close to cities sometimes, but like you mentioned, Shae, like it's not always like large groups. It's basically what we understood in Indigenous tourism is their main contact should be the guide, and that person is really the experience itself. So most of the time is very smaller groups. We have as well a lot across the country. There's, right now I think there's about 1,700 businesses that are Indigenous owned across the country. And, there's many type of experiences that we're looking at, restaurants, museum, outdoor adventures, campground, golf courses, casinos, wildlife viewing, northern light experiences. There's just so much opportunity for us to showcase our culture in a very unique and authentic way. So yeah, that's why for us, like we invested quite heavily in our new platform that will be launched for National Indigenous Day, which is Destination Indigenous. And what we wanted through Destination Indigenous was to become that one-stop shop for people looking for Indigenous cultural content, because we know through the provincial partners, that is either Travel Alberta in your case, Shae, well, Indigenous experiences are often hidden like in a section of the website and not seen as the forefront, because obviously they'll put the big players, they'll put Banff and Jaspers and, like those big guys that put and invest a lot of money. And it's sometimes, Indigenous components or Indigenous experiences are often, hard to find. And that's why we want to be that, that store, that front where we don't want our members to be losing any opportunities. So everything that we do now will have a call to action, and we'll make sure that it includes a book now button, because we want to capture that clients. We don't want we know that most of our businesses are small operations. So Shae, for example, if you were an operator, and then, you go on the water for 10 hours, and you're the one taking the bookings normally, but you've been on you've had a lot of sun that day, crazy clients, you might not have time to pick up your phone or answer that email, and you might be losing on bookings. So that's why we are trying to connect all our members now, especially in the work that we're doing now, to give them online purchasable capabilities and training, to make sure that they're embedded within our website, and they're not going to lose any opportunities. That is either through an OTA, online travel agencies, or our own website. And that's one thing that I wanted to say earlier, and I'm not sure who made the comment, but most of the time, and that's why we're trying to make a video now. The next video that will be available on June 21st is actually kind of a homemade video. Like, it's nice to have the 4K kind of screen and cameras and stuff like that, but sometimes people feel more comfortable seeing a homemade video and something that is more genuine. Yeah, and it's like where the trust is definitely amplified. Yeah. So that's why we're trying to have our industry to speak for themselves, and then we'll put that together and we'll package it and we'll make it nice in order for visitors to consider coming to an Indigenous experiences, either at the domestic, local, or hyper-local level.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think the one thing that I can add to that, those are all excellent comments. The key, I think, where we all have an advantage is we have the small, intimate number participant programs. And that is going to be key moving forward. Those large gatherings at this point are things that I think the public are going to, somewhat steer away from, which opens the door for, the smaller regulated control programs. The key thing that we found, though, in some of the things that we're putting together, and our company is working on the protocols right now. so that the protocols become standard across the board. So every operator is delivering an experience following specific guidelines that are set to keep, obviously we can't prevent people from getting COVID, but if we have a set of rules and instructions that are, unanimous across the board, a traveler knows that if I go to this spot, they've got this certificate, I know they've covered off these specific protocols to make it safe. So they already feel good, because I know in some of the things that we've done, people are asking, well, what are you doing? Like, what is it that you're doing? And we found that a lot of operators are doing different things. There's not like one set that says these are the things that we're doing to be able to ensure. So that's what we've been looking at is how we can develop that level of confidence and safety, not only for the employee. Obviously the employee and the guides are key to that whole process as well, but it's also, makes it safe for the client. And, those small numbers, the social distancing and all of those things with respect to program delivery is super key to where we're going. And I really think, like, the Niagara Falls and those places, the smaller hotels, they have, I think they have an advantage right now by having the ability to not have large gatherings of people. So I think it's really positive for the smaller operators to excel now.
Yeah, and that's a very good point. And just to add on that, and that's why, like, our organization at a national level, and all provinces are different and all industry are different too. So it makes it very complicated to have a set clear rules. But what we can do though is to propose at least health and safety guidelines. And that's been a high focus for ours, like in the past couple of weeks, and just putting that together to help. And then just people sometimes in remote communities might not have a printer. Well, offer them an opportunity to print their material. Offer them the signs, the poster to help. And, like this has been like a key focus of ours, and just to make sure we can support our industry in time of, crisis. But, and that's also why we built national guidelines a few years back, just to have our businesses really understand what is an authentic Indigenous experience, and how can they work through those guidelines to set themselves apart from the rest of the experiences. And that's why as well we're coming at the end of the year. It was supposed to be March 31st, but we had to postpone because of COVID. But that's why we also have Project Rise for us, and it's the certification of Indigenous experiences across the country, and it's meant to elevate the businesses and give them a certification, because we know that a lot of people are using the fact that Indigenous is trendy right now, and then all they want to do is, oh, hey, I put a teepee in my backyard, so I'm got an Indigenous experience. That's so cool. But then in fact, like, the content that they're giving is like, it's bad, and it makes us look bad, and it's terrible. So we have to protect our industry at the same time by elevating our businesses to make sure that they have the stiffer standards, and then build that trust to consumer.
Yeah, perfect. Yeah, that's absolutely it.
And to speak on the health and safety side, from from like Indigenous Tourism Alberta's perspective, we've actually created a health and safety blog post that gives you a handful of resources and really walks you through how to adapt your business with the updated health and safety restrictions. And we will be doing a live webinar this Friday talking about kind of all the health and safety restrictions in play for Alberta, and a handful of resources and some ideas on how to adapt your business with health and safety as the main cause. Because like you said, Seb, like, every province is different, so it's hard to have a national standard. There's also going to be things that translate across the board, but each province is going to have its own individual standards, especially as they reopen in different phases. So I think that's important.
Yeah, absolutely.
Great. Thank you all for your wonderful contribution. I guess it's interesting. Just as I've been researching for this and speaking to people, I've been asking everyone I can, what are your travel plans for the next year? And every single person so far has said, oh, it's a year to travel Canada. We're just going to stay in Canada. So just everything that we're discussing here, it really is the time to be marketing for that and thinking about all the health and safety standards, and for the small businesses, because like you said, every single person has also told me they don't want to go to the big tourist areas. You know, they're looking at smaller places, going up north, looking, you know, at those small group experiences where they will be away from the crowds. So.
Well, I think it's important to just share that message across the board. Like, there's certain provinces that have very high awareness of Indigenous tourism and those experiences available, and that it's present within the province. There's other provinces where there's a huge education gap as well for the consumer of what's actually available. And I know in Alberta, you know, we can also do a much stronger job of just building that consumer awareness of the variety of Indigenous experiences, and that they're all not homogenous, and that they're very different throughout our province, let alone throughout the country. And, you know, there's a lot of individuals that travel outside Canada every year for cultural experiences. And I think this is an opportunity to really educate those consumers on the fact that there's cultural experiences in your own backyard. You've just never had the opportunity or thought about or felt comfortable enough to actually experience those and go out to that community and learn about that type of thing. So I think, you know, really educating those local consumers, especially those ones that typically go to, say, New Zealand or Australia or Southeast Asia, and they're looking for hill tribes and all these other cultural experiences. You know, we have such a diverse culture here and diverse Indigenous cultural experiences throughout our province and throughout the country, that we really need to share that message for those individuals looking for that, because we can certainly fill that void within our province and within our country. I think it's just that awareness piece that is missing sometimes.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, so before I open it up to Q&A, just two things. So in a few minutes, we will start question and answer. So if you have anything that you'd like to ask, you can start typing it into the chat now. And just before we do that, I wanted to open it up to the three of you just to see if there's anything else that you wanted to present, any other information that you think is important to discuss before we close off.
Well, I'll go. Go ahead, Shae.
I was just going to reiterate the importance of, once you've built your health and safety measures, that you're marketing those measures as well. So because there's going to be a huge hesitancy for travel, and we need to build that consumer confidence up. So if, whether that's, you know, you're saying we are COVID-19 friendly, and then there's a find out more button on your homepage, and then you click that and it talks about all the procedures and processes that you do as an operator, you know, just those type of things. Or even if it's social media saying, you know, okay, we've just finalized our health and safety measures for our business, we're now operating safely, click here for more info. It gives them the face value. Okay, there's confidence, but then if they want more detail to build that confidence, the resources are there. And I think that is going to be very important moving forward, because regardless of how interested they are, if that confidence in safety is not there, they're not going to want to experience it.
Yeah, I agree with Shae on that very, very much. And I also think, you know, Shae, people can start to also start to look at how they can restructure their programs as well, to make their programs, you know, more conducive to the social distancing. Like, for instance, a lot of our stuff, we do a lot of kayaking and canoe trips and water-based activities. And we've really focused now from the canoe to the kayak, because we can put individuals in kayaks and keep them way easier separated in those situations. So again, it's taking a look at the health and safety first, number one, and then how you can look at the programs you have, and then you know, either revamp those or create new ones that enable for that social distancing. And that's going to make people feel great when you tell them, and they do. They, you know, oh, you got kayaking? That's great. Where do we sign up? You know, and that's, you know, those are the kind of things I think as deliverables, that's what we have to look at as operators, that builds that consumer confidence.
Yeah, and I guess to close, and I agree with my two partners there, but I mean, obviously, there's always place for improvement, and there's always place for new innovative ideas. And I would just want to say, like, don't be afraid to test them out and put them out there. You can't build an empire without breaking a few bricks, and like you can't make a cake without breaking any eggs. So it's gonna happen at some point. You might not be entirely like successful or entirely satisfied with yourself, but just know your limitations, test your concept, be prepared, be yourself. And like, you got to remember that all humans are different and learn different ways, and we all have a different stress tolerance, and we all have different interest levels. So I might be interested in fishing, you might, or you could care less about fishing. So I would say, do it with your heart, do it in an authentic fashion, like you would want to be part of that experience yourself. Just do it as you wish you would learn. Network and talk to your associations. It will all be fine. It has to remain accessible, inspirational, and motivational, and learnable. And I think there's some really cool ideas out there right now that are really being successful. And I'm taking the example that Shae mentioned earlier about like the culinary part, to provide a box of local ingredients and to share that. How cool is that? Like, you can cook with someone, you have all the ingredients, you don't need to go to the store, you get all that handy. And that's also, you could do like storytelling. There's so much storytelling, legends and tales that can be done, beading workshop, yoga in a park, talk about medicinal plants, museum tours. Now we're seeing large gatherings, powwows and events like turning into social events virtually. Northern Light experiences, singing, language class, photography workshop, expeditions in normally overcrowded space, wildlife encounter, wine tasting, drawing, providing drawings to the kids, and then like just working together. And there's when we get to a stage in the pandemic, which we've never experienced in our past, I'm sure, and I'm not the only one here, but we have to come together, and those ideas and building things together, people need to feel good. People need feel good content, and that's what we can provide. And that's why our operators, don't be afraid. Put your stuff out there. Someone will have an interest in it for sure.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So a really nice message to close on. So what I'm going to do is share my screen. We have just our contact information for each of our respective organizations, should you want more information. And at the same time, if any of you have any questions, we'll stick around for a couple minutes here to see them through. And actually, it will not let me see the chat and see my screen. So I apologize. Hopefully you can still see it like this.
All right, well, maybe we can touch on one last thing.
Sure.
Can we talk about Shae's haircut? Because I really think like it looks so pretty, and I know that's not everyone that has a barber in this round. So how do you when you do the haircut, how do you talk about like your hairdresser and saying like, this is the cut that I want?
Well, I'll tell you, it starts with virtual experiences. So I appreciate that, Seb. I think you're just jealous because I can actually grow a little bit more on top, but
at least it's still grow on you. Like,
I know.
Well, speaking of virtual experiences, I've actually seen a couple of hairdressers doing teach yourself in isolation how to cut your own hair.
Your hair.
Really?
Even that is being done virtually.
I'm not there. I'm not there.
But for people really interested in learning more about like virtual experiences, Airbnb has launched probably about a month ago, Airbnb virtual experiences that you can be featured on. It's quite simple.
Yeah.
Obviously they do take money out of it, but I mean there's great inspirational stories on there. Like, for example, you can be trained by an Olympian, you can like learn about the mindset. There's just cooking lessons obviously everywhere. But I mean, there's good platforms out there that are available. Also, if you want to be featured on a larger audience. So I think that's quite interesting as well.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, I don't see any chat questions coming through, but hopefully you can see the screen here. Thank you all for joining us today. For those of you who might be listening to this as a recording after with the audio and can't see the chat, we'll make sure that that contact information is attached to the link for the audio recording, however you receive it. So no need to worry about that.
As it is called National Indigenous Month, you should take some advantages and see some of the amazing content that is out there right now. Talking about summer solstice in Ottawa, that is doing a great job, I know as well. Most PMOs and Indigenous operators and associations are doing some great content for National Indigenous Day. So check this out. Like this, I think there's some great content coming up.
Absolutely, yeah.
Good reminder. And actually, with that, also with the recording and the video, I'll be sure to attach some links to some great content that you can check out.
Absolutely.
Okay, excellent. Yeah.
Awesome. Oh, it looks like maybe we.
Also, anything like, I guess if it's virtual, anyone can attend, but specifically for focus on our Alberta Indigenous operators, Indigenous Tourism Alberta will be putting out bi-weekly a handful of webinars from the health and safety standards to tourism development, all these type of things over the next, say, 3 to 4 months. So keep an eye out, whether it's through our newsletter or through our social, and then there'll be a lot more educational webinars coming out from a provincial perspective on that end.
Great. All right. Well, thank you, everyone. And I hope you all have a wonderful end to the week.